Hirono.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, here we are once again. Once again with the hearing espousing Republican conspiracy theories and once again focusing on Jack Smith. How many times do we Democrats have to say, why don't we just bring Jack Smith before this committee? Why do we not put him under oath? Why don't we just ask him questions? The witnesses this morning are speculating as to what Jack Smith knew or what he told the judge, speculating about what the judge was told by Jack Smith. I mean, instead of all these speculations, why don't we just call Jack Smith?
The hearing takes a dramatic turn as a senator launches into a fiery and unapologetic critique, accusing the entire proceeding of being driven by partisan motives rather than facts. From the very beginning, the tone is sharp and confrontational. The senator questions why the committee continues to speculate about Jack Smith instead of simply bringing him in to testify under oath.
See, that has never been adequately answered in my view. I think it's time, rather than continuing to go down this rabbit hole. And really, you know, the term milking a dead cow or beating a dead horse comes to mind, because this is what this exercise is. It is milking a dead cow, which, you know, describes, I looked it up, describes a completely futile, pointless, or waste of effort that will yield no results. It implies trying to extract value, information, or result from a source that is already dead, exhausted, or incapable of providing anything further. So the further providing of information should come directly from Jack Smith. So, you know, I'm going to repeat what some of my colleagues have said. There are three things that we can focus on with the work of this committee, rather than wasting our time like this. First is call Jack Smith. Second, he has already offered to testify, so we're not going to get much resistance from him. He's already testified before the House. And he issued some reports, and we should get access to Volume 2 of Jack Smith's report. So not only should we call him to testify, but we should get our hands talking about getting information that would be good for us to have. Volume 2 of Jack Smith's report. And then thirdly, you know, there's been a focus on Kash Patel. After he received immunity, he did testify to the grand jury, and we've been trying to access that testimony. And Director Patel has stonewalled and lied to this committee, saying that he can't provide that testimony. Yes, he can. And once again, my Republican colleagues don't seem to care that he lied to this committee. So we have, as far as I'm concerned, a refusal to confront the truth. And I'm really disheartened by what is happening to an institution called the FBI, not to mention the Department of Justice, but the FBI that had, I would say, a reputation for doing the work that protected the American people, and that is not the case. What we're seeing are people being fired, not for lack of competence. In fact, they were very, very competent, not for misconduct, but because they happened to question the leader, Donald Trump. This continuous effort on the part of my Republican colleagues to just bow down to this president who does not believe that the rule of law applies to him is amazing. And you know what? The American people are getting it. And that is why millions of them, in fact, I think this Saturday, there's going to be another rally, No King's Rally. Millions of Americans are saying, hey, Donald Trump, you are not our king. You cannot run this country through executive orders. You cannot act as though the rule of law does not apply to him. And by the way, no thanks to the Supreme Court. I think their decision on his immunity was one of the worst decisions that this court, and there are many. So let me just ask one question of Mr. O'Leary. Thank you very much for testifying. In your experience, and I know there are some very fine FBI agents who either were fired or left, over 1,000. Can you go over again, the fact that all of these very, very experienced people who were engaged in white-collar crime investigations, cyber attacks, et cetera, their departure, tell us how their departure is making our country safer.
Senator, the loss of agents and analysts and professional staff across the FBI is impacting a variety of programs, from white-collar crime, protecting the integrity of our financial markets, and public corruption. Cyber, the head of the cyber division was fired, an exceptional agent that I served with for years. The head of the critical incident response group, who was the acting director in the beginning of the Trump administration, Brian Driscoll, was fired just this last August because he refused to fire one of his employees without cause as directed by Kash Patel. Brian Driscoll demonstrated the courage and the integrity that you would expect from a leader, and he refused to do so. He, in turn, was fired himself, thrown out of the FBI after years of service. He's a recipient of the Shield of Bravery and the Shield of Valor. Shield of Valor for being on a joint hostage recovery operation in Syria with the Special Operations Task Force to rescue an American citizen. These are the kind of individuals who are losing, and those who are not being fired.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary, for standing up for an institution that deserves our support. And instead, we have a director who parties around, who flies around in a plane, who visits his girlfriend. Give me a break.
According to this argument, the entire hearing is built on assumptions: what he knew, what he said, and what a judge may have believed, without direct evidence from the central figure himself. The frustration escalates. The hearing is described as a pointless exercise compared to milking a dead cow, a vivid metaphor suggesting that the investigation is futile, exhausted, and incapable of producing any real results. The senator insists that if the goal is truth, then the solution is simple: call Jack Smith, obtain his full report, and stop chasing speculation. But the criticism doesn't stop there. Attention shifts to another controversial figure, with accusations that key testimony is being withheld despite legal authority to release it. The senator claims there is a deliberate refusal to confront facts, suggesting that political motivations are overriding transparency. Then the focus broadens, turning into a much larger warning. The senator expresses deep concern about the state of major institutions, particularly the FBI and the Department of Justice. Once viewed as pillars of integrity and public protection, these agencies are now portrayed as being under pressure, with experienced personnel allegedly removed not for incompetence or misconduct, but for standing up to leadership. The stakes are raised even higher. The argument expands into a sweeping critique of political loyalty, claiming that some leaders prioritize allegiance over the rule of law. The senator warns that this dynamic is dangerous, suggesting it undermines democratic principles and weakens institutions meant to protect the public. Then comes the public reaction. Millions of Americans, the senator claims, are beginning to push back, rejecting what they see as overreach and demanding accountability. The message is clear: no individual is above the law. As the questioning continues, an expert witness is asked to explain the real-world impact of losing experienced FBI personnel. The answer is sobering. Critical areas like financial crime, public corruption, and cybersecurity are all affected. The departure of seasoned agents, some highly decorated and deeply experienced, has created gaps that could weaken national security and law enforcement capabilities. Specific examples are given of respected leaders being removed after refusing questionable directives, reinforcing the narrative of internal conflict and loss of integrity. By the end, the hearing feels less like a routine discussion and more like a warning about power, accountability, and the future of key American institutions.